to Annabel and Nikki. Woohoo! Welcome to Kōrero Café. It is wonderful to have you here. Let's hear a little bit about you. Let's perhaps start with Nikki and then we'll move to Annabel. Hit us with a bit of an intro. Tell us who you are, what makes you tick, where you are even, and what's going on with you.
Okay. Ko te ahu mairangi te monga te ru nei taku nākau. Ko manako te moana mahia nei aku mā harahara no waiapa ahau. E mihi ana ki ngā tohu o nihi o te whanganui ātara e noho nei au. Kia ora, I'm Nikki Hurst. Te ahu mairangi is the monga that speaks to my heart. The Manukau harbour is the river, the harbour that alleviates my worries. I'm from Pukekohe, Waiapa, and right now I stay in the beautiful Northland part of Wellington. I'm a mum. I am a program delivery manager at Open Polytech, used to be on the BHSD at Unitech, and before that was on the BYD at Welltech. So lots and lots of time in academia talking about waffly things.
Hold on for just a second, Nikki, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but you did just throw a whole lot of letters at us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what those letters are? Not in like a Sesame Street alphabet kind of way, but what do those letters stand for?
Yep, cool. So we were really lucky a few years ago in Aotearoa to have 2 degrees for youth workers, and that specifically looked at youth work and youth development. The first one was the Bachelor of Youth Development, the BYD in Wellington. I had a teensy tiny taste of teaching into that program, originally from Tamaki Makaurau, so moved back to Auckland and got a job at Unitech, where their version of the degree was the BHSD, the Bachelor of Health and Social Development, in which students then did a major in youth development.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
Right.
Nothing like jargon. Other than that, I came to youth work fairly late in the piece, but kind of had been weirdly doing it for a really long time through sport and drama. I'm a mum to a 10-year-old, and I'm really, really nerdy about history, particularly New Zealand history, and why that context matters to us. And I need to stop umming. And also super interested in anything education, gifted kids and young people, and right now in the context of where we are in time, how we break down some of these barriers around each other and the way that our world is structured.
Whoa, very cool. Thanks very much, Nikki. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. By being a self-admitted nerd when it comes to history, particularly New Zealand history, that is going to be perfect to hear about Whakapapa today. So thank you for that. Let's hear an intro from you, Annabel.
Kia ora, talof lava, maloi lele, Annabel Prescott, and at the moment I reside in Tūwharetoa in Lake Taupo. So I'm currently looking out on our beautiful lake as we have this kōrero, so feeling very blessed and grateful to have a chat today. I'm the mother of 2 children, 8 and 6, who have Māori, Samoan and Tongan whakapapa, and both were fluent until they started school in Samoan. Was one of their first languages that they learnt alongside te reo Pākehā or te reo Pālangi. So yeah, feel really blessed that we, through my children, have the ability to access language that I wasn't afforded when I was growing up. What do I do? So I first met Nikki through did we work at Welltech together? Or was it Unitech that we worked together? I can't remember where it was first.
I think I missed you at Welltech. You might have been away on like one of the few days that I came up to the Auckland campus.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was a senior lecturer at Welltech on the addictions program. So my background is primarily in addictions and youth mental health. And at that point in time, really supported Welltech in writing the national framework for the youth development degree. And then had the opportunity to move to Unitech, where I led out the first cohort for the Bachelor of Social Health and Social Development, and then moved into kind of wellbeing and supporting staff and their wellbeing, and then decided that Taupo was calling, and so moved down here, and now currently the chief executive for a youth one-stop shop called Anamata, and we do a whole bunch of health service delivery, health promotion, youth development in the Taupo Turangi district, and yeah, that's
cool. Perfect. That is a magnificent, hearty intro from you both. I really, really appreciate that. And cool to hear from both of you a little bit about your whakapapa, which is actually my first question for you today, which is to tell us a little bit about your whakapapa. I guess expanding on what you've told us, because in talking about whakapapa, first of all, I want you to set the perfect example for us all.
No pressure.
But in talking about whakapapa, I guess like doing your research on the people, like exploring the pre-story for the people who are telling us about how to discover a pre-story, I guess is self-honoring. For lack of better terminology there. So tell us, perhaps in expanding on your intro, tell us a little bit more about your whakapapa. What are some key events? What are some key things in your family? Even going into, and you do a little bit in your article, but perhaps even more so than this. What are the key players in your whakapapa, key events, key people? Where are you from? What's your ethnicity? How did you arrive in New Zealand? Those sorts of things. Let's go back to you again, Nikki.
Okay. So I am Pākehā. I have two probably major lines that I know a lot about as far as my whakapapa goes. My maternal line, my mum's side of the family, my grandparents on that side of my family were particularly interested in history. My grandmother was really quite heavily involved. And on that side of our family, we whakapapa back to Scotland, England and Ireland, particularly Scotland and Ireland. On that side, I know that the reason that my grandmother's side wound up in Ireland was to escape from Scotland at the end of them losing their own self-determination to the British, and with the fall of Culloden and lots of stuff that went on there.
Great.
Total history nerd, yeah. And then in Ireland, they skipped out of Ireland probably about the time of the Irish famine. If we ever leave, it's a really good time to follow. We landed in the beautiful Manukau Harbour. Got here just prior to the treaty, one branch of that family, but most of them came over sort of in the 1860s when there was a real drive to bring people to Aotearoa as settlers, as farmers, and particularly with my whānau's background as market gardeners.
Mm-hmm.
They were settled down into what had been renamed as the Franklin region. And there's a little teensy tiny church up on a hill there that was one of the skirmishes in the New Zealand Wars or the Land Wars or whatever you want to call it. My ancestors on that side, father and son, were in the church when a party of Māori arrived. Shots were fired. And I was telling the story at a Kōrero Tupu hui years ago when we were talking about professionalisation and what things look like. And I was sitting next to our amazing matakino, and he's just sitting there sniggering away to himself, as he likes to do. And I kind of finished my story, and I said, oh, you know, and I've always felt really bad about that, and I grew up knowing that story, and you can go to the church and you can see the bullet holes. And I know quite well Matakino stays down the road from my whānau there, and said how we'd met with the iwi involved and sort of talked about what happened a number of years ago and that kind of thing. And then it was Matakino's turn to introduce himself, and he explained why he is named Matakino and about this group of people that turned up with their bugs and their diseases and then built this weird church and then shot at his whānau. Right. And it turned out it's all my fault that he's named that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That I didn't know that story. That's incredible. So there you were in the same room sharing about the same event, but from two totally different sides.
Totally different. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Wow, that's heavy.
Yeah. So my Jack on that side of the family is 9th, 10th generation New Zealander. We're firmly the coloniser. My dad's side of the family is a much shorter journey. They came over with my great-grandparents who were British. Very British thing to come over to New Zealand at that point in time. And that side of the family are very much hands-on people, but almost gypsies. They sort of settled in Coromandel and then moved down to Nelson, Ashburton, and then across my grandparents' lives, they moved up the North Island, stopping at every mental hospital along the way, because my papa was a carpenter at for the then Department of Works or whatever it is that ran the hospitals.
Oh.
They stopped in King's Seat, where my dad met my mum and they got married, and then my grandparents kept going, and eventually my papa was head carpenter at what was then called Carrington Hospital or Oakley Hospital. Fast forward a few years and all of our mental health hospitals shut down and it's given to Unitec, and I used to frequently sit there at Unitec on the marae looking up to where my grandparents' house used to be, in the hour that I grew up playing in.
Wow, that's cool. Do you have connectedness in your strengths, Nikki?
Yes.
Because that is
I think so.
I can see you.
Yeah, I've got context. Yeah.
All the threads and connecting things, which is quite cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Nikki, for the rundown there. Annabel, would you be able to do the same thing for us? Hit us with what's your whakapapa, what are some of the key events in your story?
Sure, thank you. So I think my whakapapa story starts with being adopted. So I was adopted into a Pākehā family at 10 days old, and kind of always felt that like there was stories that would go on around where I was from, and that was quite entertaining, you know, like some of the things that people would come up with around what my cultural or ethnic identity was. Some of them would have been quite cool. But, you know, so always growing up not actually knowing firmly what my whakapapa is, and understanding that as I acquire new information, bits in me are confirmed around why I was drawn to particular ways of being in the world.
Wow.
So my when I met my biological mother, I did that a few years ago, and she has got no knowledge of what her whakapapa links are, knows that there is Māori within her whakapapa and that her father was able to kōrero Māori and spent a lot of time at the marae where they where she grew up. And then actually sorry, I'm a little bit of a monkey tree jumper.
Great. I like monkeys and trees and jumping. So you're
so just all over the show. And so I grew up knowing that I was adopted and knowing that I wasn't Pākehā, right? Because I don't really look Pākehā. And also my adopted parents had a biological son who's like 6'4", blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and I'm like 5 foot something and brown. So it was really clear to me right from a really young age that I had an awesome point of difference, and also naturally drawn to wanting to learn ways of being Māori and what that meant to me growing up in a Pākehā family.
When you say you had an awesome point of difference, did you always think that that was awesome?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm just checking. I'm totally aware of this, of everything that's going on in the States, and just social media is bombarded with
Totally.
and,
Yeah. And I'm really acutely aware that in my position of privilege, being able to have this kōrero, as a woman who is brown, it's important for me to assert that it is a privilege to be brown, and that I hold generational trauma, but I also hold connections to this land that go back, back as far as stories of creation go.
Cool.
So anyway, so then I'll jump back to the beginning of this year, so post writing this article. Oh no, I won't say that. So my kids are Samoan Tongan, and I was always kind of like, I'll support that part of their whakapapa because it's really important that they can kōrero, particularly Samoan, and kōrero Māori. And then I met my biological father at the beginning of this year after writing the article.
Oh, wow.
Only to find out that his whakapapa is Samoan, Tongan, Irish.
Wow.
And so for me, when we're talking about kind of whakapapa, I'm like, the knowledge of whakapapa is, I was trying to think about how to articulate this, and I don't think I've got it right, but it's kind of concrete and solid at the same time as kind of ever evolving as we find out new, particularly for me as an adopted child, as I find out more stories about my whakapapa, more kind of confirmation about why I do what I do and who I am in the world is kind of, I don't know, ticked off. I don't know.
That's amazing. I don't, you said you don't think you're there yet, but I think that's cool. It's concrete because, I mean, you can't change it, but it's ever evolving because you can keep learning more and you never know what kind of is included there. So that's quite cool. It's very exciting. I like that. So now that we've heard from each of you about your whakapapa, and what your own sort of story is, and thank you for sharing too. It's not easy to share about the tough stuff, but it is totally who you are. So so I appreciate that. What does whakapapa mean to you? Like, what is into the concept, not necessarily your whakapapa, but what does the whole of whakapapa mean to you as individuals? And maybe we'll start with you first this time, Annabel.
Yeah, so I think for me, whakapapa allows, and what I try to facilitate through my children, which is different than the experience I had growing up, is a solid understanding of whakapapa and of cultural identity. And so when I think about what that means when we're working with young people, it is kind of about going, how do we sit with, and this is, you know, from how I've traveled through the world, but how do we sit with uncertainty and hold whakapapa and hold the value of whakapapa while supporting a young person to figure out who they are in the world. And so for me, whakapapa is super important, and it also can't be disempowering for the young person, because I think part of the kōrero I've had in the article was around this whole level of discomfort around not being able to pepeha and not being able to do whakapapa links. So when I want to express the importance of whakapapa, I also want to express the importance of sitting in uncertainty and sometimes having more questions than what we do answers.
Cool. That's awesome. And yeah, we've just had a comment here which says chills, and that totally does give me chills. And I'm not sure if we'll have time for this. We'll see how we go. But I love, Nikki, when you shared your pepeha, you shared a kind of a Pākehā version which is going around, which sort of, it helps tread lightly in those spaces that you're talking about, Annabelle. So I think that's very cool. What about you, Nikki? What does whakapapa mean to you?
God, how do you follow that?
Yeah,
Maybe I won't try and follow it, but what I will do is talk about why I use that particular format of pepeha, and hopefully what I think will come through as I talk through that. So one of the things that I love about the youth development sector and sort of the wider reach we have a community is we're our own journey and we're our own story with our own whakapapa as a group of people. And part of that is we push each other along. So all of those beautiful whakapapa concepts that people will know and recognise, like standing on the shoulders of giants and it's my place where I stand and it's who comes before me and how that impacts me and all those things. Part of the journey of the youth sector is who has come before us and where we're at now. And I was sitting in my office at Unitec having a kōrero with my colleagues Jane and Ro about pepeha and pepeha as a form, because I was a white Pākehā woman teaching Māori youth development to a group of students who were largely Pacifica and African, and what that looked like, and supporting them to explore their pepeha for their kura tupu applications. And just saying, you know, even though I was really privileged to grow up with a deep connection to iwi Māori where I lived and had a number of amazing teachers who really pushed that for us, that I didn't feel it was appropriate to say that I own the landmarks around me, because I don't. But by the same token, I have absolutely no connection at all to the equivalent back in the UK. It just, we've been gone too long. It means nothing to me. Nearly no one in my family has even been there. There's some crumbling Hurst castle somewhere, and that's about it.
That's pretty cool to say.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Hurst is like Smith. It literally just means the wood. So yeah. But anyway, so we were having this kōrero about, you know, I'm not entitled to own these places, or to say, even though my whānau has been here for a certain amount of time, we haven't tread this land as long as anyone else. And we've got things to make up for with this land. And how that fits, and how asking students to do that is also really, really deeply challenging for me and for them. And so we've been having this conversation. Turns out our good friend Rod Baxter had been having a similar conversation with some of his colleagues, and this is what I mean about the youth sector having its own whakapapa and its own journey and hitting places in time. And Rod shared that beautiful form of pepeha, saying, oh my gosh, look what I found. This is exactly how I feel, because I don't want to say I own those places. I haven't earned the right. I don't whakapapa to those places. I get to enjoy them and be here and be part of the journey of this place. But to take someone else's way of speaking, or to take somebody else's way of sharing the journey of the whenua through pepeha isn't something that as white people it's appropriate for us to do. And so that's why I love that pepeha, because it more fits where I see myself on this journey. And that's why I always feel it's not my place to define whakapapa. I can explore concepts of whakapapa and I can do that safely from an academic perspective. But me as a human and as a person, the more I go down the road of this journey, the more I realise how little I know, how privileged I've been privileged to have people like Annabel and our amazing friend Nikki Timu and some other really strong manawahine who have pushed my buttons and who have challenged me and then given me another piece of information to go on with. So it's never for me to define what whakapapa is.
Yeah. Cool. I being Pākehā myself, I've been on a similar journey of what does it look like for me to embrace these beautiful things of Te Ao Māori, because I am an Aotearoa and that's part of being here, and to respect the culture, but also being careful not to just continue to take
Let's not recolonize.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Annabel? You don't have to if you don't want to, but I'm curious in case you've got something on the tip of your tongue.
Oh no, Annabelle's got the screaming. She may have to jump on and back off.
Like that for a minute.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Sorry.
That's totally fine. Annabelle says she's got major screaming going on, so I release you to be a mum. She's long gone. She's
Yeah.
as if she needed my permission.
The joys of parenting. Yes, I have a book in my notebook that says "not now" in really large letters. Yeah.
Not now.
Pretty much. Yeah. That was me trying to quietly beforehand. Yeah.
Well, we've just got you here, Nikki. I'm wondering, do you have any stories of young people that you've worked with and where you've journeyed with them with whakapapa, and whether they were Māori or non-Māori or whatever? Do you have any stories of young people learning their whakapapa and that being and how was that for them?
Yeah, it's always that balance, I guess. Oh, we got a lily. A journey with a young person. Sorry.
It's all right, you're right. I'll just while you're thinking, Annabelle, do you? So Nikki's talking about being Pākehā and what it looks like to I guess honour the parts of Te Ao Māori that whakapapa deserves to have honoured, but that kind of the tension with it not actually being her own culture. Do you have anything you want to add to that from your own unique cultural perspective?
I think that particularly at this point in time, we can't disconnect this kōrero from a kōrero around privilege and around race.
Cool.
And I think that we need to be always actioning systems that perpetuate racism or discrimination of any form.
Yeah.
And I think as Nikki is having her kōrero, and as Nikki and I had a bit of a chat prior to this, it's really important that all people have a awareness around what the privileges that they sit in, because we all have different kinds of privileges.
Yeah.
And I guess particularly at the moment and in the context of this kōrero, it is around how a brown person experiences the world really differently than a person not of colour. And also in our context, what the role of colonisation has had on perpetuating those inequities for tangata whenua.
Mm.
And then in our history and our stories around how people of Pacific ancestry have also been treated in our land.
Yeah.
So
Well, we've just had a question come through on the chat, which is how has that impacted on your journey? Which I'm totally keen to hear, because both of you talk quite a lot about, in your article, you talk quite a lot about colonization, which is totally key to this conversation. I don't think we can really talk about whakapapa without colonization. And Annabel, you used this really heartbreaking line that I'm going to read because it really like stabbed me in the heart, which is,
I don't have my.
no, don't apologize, because you say it how it is. So part of colonization was to dehumanize Indigenous people and block Indigenous taonga like whakapapa.
Mm.
What's that experience been like for you? I mean, I guess your story is unique in that you were adopted.
Yeah.
But I suppose even when you met your birth mother, she didn't have access to that whakapapa like she should have.
Well, so I guess that from a perspective of colonisation, there were acts that were in place that were legislated until recently that actually blocked the information being passed down to the adopted child. So I had a veto on my adoption, which meant that my ability to access information I wasn't able to do until I was about 18.
Wow.
But also it meant that the biological mother at any point in time could say, no, you're not, I'm not permitting any access to this child.
Wow.
Having access to knowing who I am and what my name is.
Right.
So when I think about how a Pākehā worldview would operate, which has shifted, right? Because we are evolving human beings, so I don't want to discredit that we are learning what people need to know more. But back in the 80s, early 80s, when I was born, and prior to that, there was just a sense that brown babies were better off in Pākehā families and being brought up in the Pākehā ways of being. And that's not a unique story to New Zealand.
Yeah.
But it did have an impact, aroha mai.
I love that.
Kia ora, Dougie.
On what access and knowledge I had access to and places I had access to, because that information was never accessible to me.
Right. And so colonization is, I think lots of people think about colonization as land and houses, but actually it's deeply embedded in systems and in the ins and outs of laws and stuff. It goes so much further.
Yeah.
I'm really curious. We've just got a few minutes left, and I'm keen to go back to this question that I asked Nikki while you were out of the room, Annabel.
Yeah, and sorry, I actually have an answer. So
Okay, great. I'll let you know the question, and perhaps Annabel, you can have a think about it too while Nikki answers, because I'm keen to hear a little bit about the power of whakapapa. And Annabel, you've sort of shared about the power of your own whakapapa and discovering that and what that's meant for your children, which I think is fantastic. I'm keen to hear if either of you have stories of journeying with young people to discover their whakapapa, and what that journey has been like for them. So Nikki, what have you got to share with us?
So my big pause before is, as I rattle through a whole range of young people, and generally the younger end of young people I've worked with, and how I can share what they've shared with me without asking their permission, and particularly from my context of just answer it, Jack. From their perspective of working with me in play therapy and child therapy, and I can't think of anything that's really appropriate for me to share, but one thing I can share is some kōrero from my cultural supervisor, who I know she will be really happy for me to share, within a group setting, and it was a real challenge that she laid down to a group of us. And one of the concepts that, as a white youth worker within the systems we work in, and as a result of colonisation, that I'm really conscious of is expecting a young person to tell me their story. That's not my job. That's not what I'm there for. Or in the context of teaching, we really embrace the concept of ako and giving people the mana to tell their own stories and share their own journeys. But in doing so, we placed extra challenges and extra responsibilities on them and took the responsibilities off our shoulders and said, that's your thing, that's your journey, and you should share it with me. And that's not how it works. That's recolonizing those young people. And that's me from my place of power saying, you should share what you know with me, and you should take the leadership for this knowledge, even though particularly within the context of teaching, I'm the one that's being paid the megabucks to be there to teach them, and they're the one that's walking out the student loan. So I can bring a huge amount of knowledge to the table as an academic. I can share with you what I know about the impacts of colonisation, and I can rattle off all the citations and all that carry on and hoo-ha, but I can never expect to know your story, and I don't have ownership of that, and I should never have that expectation that if there is a gap in my knowledge or there is a part of your journey that you could use to better make the point I'm making, it is not my place ever to ask you to take on that responsibility. It's to create a space in which it's okay for you to share that, should you want to.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful and deep, and makes me want to bust out the code of ethics and just as we wrap up, because I'm cautious of time. Annabel, do you have any stories that you want to share, or do you or that you know of?
Yeah, I think for me, what we are learning more about at the moment, and sorry, I'm going to talk like more broadly rather than of a specific kōrero about a young person, is that we are finally acknowledging that the colonisation continues to happen.
Yes.
Every day we experience the impact of colonisation, and we're understanding more how the trauma of colonisation manifests. And when I think about working with young people, I think about, rather than a historical narrative which might have been, oh, they're using drugs and alcohol, let's sort out their drug and alcohol problem. And yet we'll do a great youth development approach and be strengths-based and, you know, balance it out with managing their risk kind of stuff. When we think about a story or prioritising whakapapa and prioritising acknowledging colonisation and the trauma of colonisation that continues to happen, we actually take quite a different approach.
Yeah, that's...
And we need to, in my view anyway, it is about, again, seeing that young person holistically.
Yeah.
And holistically is also about what they carry from an intergenerational perspective. And I think that shifts then the paradigm and the way in which we engage with young people. And for me, that is where we end up working with the young person's ahua, or way of being, and their wairua. And yeah, and also I guess I just want to tautoko, you know, what Nikki was saying, because we've also got we've got another layer of power within this kōrero, which is that we're adult women talking about working with young people. And so particularly as adults, not only is our role is to have awareness around, and this conversation around whakapapa and colonisation and the power in which and privilege which sits within that kōrero. But as adults, we've also got another layer of power and privilege.
Yeah, true.
When we're working with young people. Yeah. So creating that space becomes even more important.
Far out. Okay. I came here wanting answers, team, and you have just given me more questions. So, and so you should, because this is, as you say, this is evolving. This is something that we can't ever stop learning, and it's endless, isn't it? So this has been fantastic. Do either of you have any final words or anything that you're just dying to say before we wrap up for today?
I just want to thank the young people who contributed to our article, because for me that was actually what made it. Yeah.
Kia ora.
Awesome.
And thanks for letting the kids do their Zoom bombs.
Yay.
We love it. We love it. We would be pretending if we didn't let that kind of thing happen. So that is wonderful. Hey, thank you so much, Annabel, and thank you so much, Nikki. It's a real privilege to be able to interview you here, and it's wonderful to have you aboard the Arataiahi team in your various different ways, both of you. And thank you so much for being here. And I appreciate it, and so do our guests who have tuned in today. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys. Cool.
Kia ora.